While our day-to-day life anxieties and depressions are super bad and often extremely hard to cope with, what happens when it's on a global level, when it becomes something so big like COVID or war and various things that you see, rioting, people getting killed in mass amounts? How do we handle that anxiety? And how do you kind of get to the resolution of still living your life? Let's chat about that. Episode 60 of the Positivity Experience, Surviving Global Anxiety.
Check it out.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to episode 60 of the Positivity Experience. It's your girl Lori, and yes, this is like a bonus end of the week episode where most episodes are just once a week on Sunday. But some things have happened over the night, and I also had someone reach out to me on Instagram to kind of help them maneuver a little bit about what has happened. So when I woke up this morning, I had a lot of alerts on the war on Ukraine that Putin did overnight. Now, I am located in the States, by the way. However, we do have listeners all over the world, and I cannot begin to tell you how much I appreciate you, I enjoy you, and I love you deeply. So I did want to kind of cover this because it is relevant not just to Ukraine and to the people who are affected there, but it does bring a different light upon all of the things that we struggle with from a global perspective. So, we talk a lot about our day-to-day anxieties, relationships anxieties, general anxiety, health anxiety. We kind of talk about that. That's kind of a day-to-day topic around here. Now, what becomes problematic and what can become harder for people is on the global scale. And I think a lot of you probably saw this when the COVID-19 pandemic hit back in, let's say, early 2020. Little hint on it in the latter part of 2019. But here in the States, we were affected mostly starting the first month or so of 2020. And it was just kind of weird, right? Like everybody's going through their day-to-day kind of dysfunction in life, but you kind of know how to maneuver it. You don't have to love it. You don't have to like it, but you kind of learn how to maneuver it. However, you wake up one day and it's like, oh, by the way, no one can go anywhere. Like you can't travel. You can't leave your house. Everybody has to be inside, wear a mask. You got to wipe down your groceries. Matter of fact, don't even go out to get groceries. You're like, wow, what is going on here? Now, I will tell you, I work from home, so it didn't necessarily affect me on a level of like going out. And because I do a lot of energy work, there had been, when you're dealing with energy, when energy's off and something's coming. Now we didn't know that it was going to be this big COVID-19 situation, but it does happen around the energy because you can feel it's heavy and it just feels oppressive, and especially when you're really in tune with it. I don't mean when you're operating from paranoia or anxiety. I'm saying when you're super connected to energy. So we knew something big was coming. We just didn't know the level. And I think probably the hardest thing for people is a few things. This is why I will tell you this, and I will tell you this in just about every podcast. Staying in the present space is your best friend. It's going to save your mental health. It's going to save your physical health. It's going to save all of that to stay in the present space. Because when COVID hit, it was like, oh my God, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? Because in the beginning, remember, nobody really knew anything. Nobody knew the level, how severe it was, what was happening, what the next trajectory path of that was going to be. Nobody knew. So it was the unknown. And that is where the problem is when it comes to any anxieties, but especially global anxieties. Because when people aren't in control, it creates a level of anxiety. But when you can learn to stay in the present space, take care of yourself, work on healing yourself, giving yourself time every day, it does make it a little bit more tolerable. I'm not telling you this is just going to make it like a cakewalk, but what I am saying is it's not going to stress you on such high levels. I will say when COVID-19 hit, people really started amping up my phone lines, right? Because again, I talk to people all over the world. So I was talking to people in countries that it was already hit, but not here in the States. And it wasn't like a massive amount of people because it was still kind of new, but people were like, I'm not really sure what's happening here. I don't know how to maneuver this. So by the time it hit here, I was like, oh, well, okay, this makes sense. Like this would be the next progression. So when things happen and you don't understand it, and you feel as though you're not in control, you immediately go into survival mode, which I honestly will tell you is from like way back in like caveman days, right? Like when you had that little reptilian brain that said, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get food, but it's not like they had DoorDash. You had to, and it's not like they had a grocery store. You had to go out. You had to maneuver other cavemen. You had to maneuver pterodactyls and other saber-toothed tigers just to try to go get some food. And remember, at that point, the language barrier outside of drawings and stuff, it wasn't like you could be like, hey man, here I am. Like none of that was happening. So because of that, that carries a level within our DNA of what we call, you might have heard it as the reptilian brain, the lizard brain. You might have also heard it as the survival brain. It kind of all goes in that hand in hand. And that's ingrained in our DNA, right? That's just part of being a human being. So when I got this message this morning on my Instagram, this is from a lovely listener who is from Moldova. Now, Moldova is located right between Romania and Ukraine. So, and it's like kind of slivered right in the middle, like the white part of the Oreo cookie. And this is what I was woken up to today. Hey, Lori, I'm originally from Moldova, the country next to Ukraine. I study abroad at the moment, but my family were literally woken up by the bombs. Yes, the countries are that close. This is really a weird time for me. I feel numb and yet terrified for the future and eventual war. Could you address this issue on TikTok or podcast? Not politically, obviously, but navigating these feelings of uncertainty, fear of war. I feel sort of guilty for continuing to live my normal life, or maybe I just don't know how I can help besides donations. I'm just confused how to navigate this. And absolutely did I want to jump on here immediately. I literally cleared an hour out today because when I got this, you have to realize, yes, Nico is absolutely affected because their family is on the ground experiencing this situation. And I'm going to be honest with you, even though we all see this and we have empathy and we have sympathy and we are there, we want to help. Somebody like Nico has family there. And I think we all know, we are all empathetic. But then when it hits our home or people who are close to us, it's even a whole nother notch. And that's where I have a hard time with, in general, it doesn't even have to be a global situation, but when people judge someone for their OCD or they judge someone for anxiety or they judge someone for their depression because it's maybe not in their backyard that they're aware of, and they just are like, whatever, it's like an excuse until something happens in their house. And then it's like, oh, but I mean, I'm depressed. Oh, wait a minute, 5 minutes ago, depression wasn't a thing. So this is relevant in this as well, because anytime something happens in a different country, and if you guys are listening abroad, please reach out to me, email or DM. I would love to know how you guys are navigating just different parts of life, because I think from being here in the States, and I'm very peace, love, and happiness, and everybody should just, go rescue every animal on the planet and live a happy life. But I understand not everybody is. So I'm interested in everybody listening in different countries. How are you feeling about COVID or what's going on in your country? I would love to know what's going on in your country. I mean, I see the news, but I'm sure there's things going on in your country that isn't deemed newsworthy, but is giving you anxiety and you are worried within your own community. These are important factors and these are important topics because so many people only see what they see, and depending on the news site is only going to hear what that specific news site is going to give you, right? Because each news site is going to lean towards one side, right or left. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. This is not a political podcast. I don't talk politics. It is not my jam. I don't want to, and I'm not going to. But what I will say is I do speak human and humanity. So when it comes, Nico, this is for you, my love. When you are worried about living your life, this is very similar, different, but similar in feeling as if someone has survivor's guilt, right? You're driving the car, you get into an accident, the passenger passes, you live. You're happy you lived, but now you have survivor's guilt. In some ways, it's because of that, right? There's a level of like, wait, they're struggling right now and valid, but I'm out here getting a latte, right? Number one, I don't want you to feel guilty about that. Okay. Because here's the deal. If everybody, and this is what I see with empaths all over the world, which is why I teach empaths how to bubble themselves from this energy. And global energy is a nightmare for people who don't know how to bubble their energy, who are empaths, because you're picking up on the feeling. And Nico, in your case, you're picking up on your family. You feel helpless. In general, you would feel helpless even if you were there. Okay. So anytime you guys see something from a global perspective and you have empathy, I love that you have empathy. I want you to continue to have empathy, but I don't want you to absorb it. There's a level of acceptability that you can observe. You can see it. You can feel it. What can you do? Is there something you can do? Great. Let's do that. Let's do that. Is there nothing that you can do? Then be there. Send your well wishes. If you're into prayer, send your prayers. Donate if possible. That's really what you can do. I know we all want to do more. We all want peace, love, and happiness. Well, most of us. I can't say all, because there are some people who really say they do, but they really don't. And that's not for you to take on. But when you're dealing with something that's out of control, especially when you're dealing with something where you have people who are in charge of other people's lives. Now that's not just from war. That's in day-to-day life, bosses, things like that. There's a level of, what's the word? I would say insecurity of not knowing what the next steps are, which is why staying present is the most important thing. You can't work. I know, but hear me out on this. You can't worry about what could happen, because if you're constantly in what could happen, you will rob yourself of any possible peace that you have in the present space, any possible peace. Okay. So yeah, you do the things to be aware. You build awareness, you take precautions. Now I said precautions. I did not say paranoia. I said precautions. So you take precautions that you need to do. And the best thing that you can do in your life is to have self-care for you. Have self-care for you. Now, you want to make sure that you have your social support, right? And early intervention is important. So don't just sit at home and get stressed out and try to figure out what to do. So what you can do is, if you can make a connection to someone in that area. Now, Nico has that ability to do that. We might not have people to the ground, but if you have connections with someone, say, okay, what do you actually need? Because sadly, and this is a fact, sadly, there will be people who, and there have been hundreds and hundreds of people who've tried to capitalize from COVID-19. And there will be hundreds of people who are going to try to capitalize from this Ukraine situation. It's sad and it's gross, but it happens. So yes, you have to be careful. You always have to be careful. You always have to keep your head on a swivel, but be careful of allowing that precaution to go into paranoia. Because the moment you go into what if this happens, what if that happens, what if this could happen, which is, typical with a PTSD response or two. But that's why staying mindful and staying present, and the acceptability that what is in your control is in your control. What is not in your control is not in your control. Okay. So try to contact with someone as close as you can. So, within the community, and this is going to be more for global tragedies that are easier to get in contact with somebody to understand really what they need. Seek out someone who is there, boots on the ground. They are there to tell you, not just John Smith from this text number that called you and said, hey, call immediately and donate $100 to Ukraine fund. No, I'm going to talk to somebody boots on the ground. So don't get paranoid, just be aware. And then that kind of goes hand in hand with identifying any local support groups, because that's going to be the most important thing. Now, when this happens, this kind of shakes up your whole internal clock. You're like, holy crap, I've been going through this process of I get up, I go to work, I make the donuts, I come home, I do all this, I do this. Okay, now global tragedy hits, or something natural disaster hits, and now that whole thing has been shaken up. This is why acceptability of staying in the present space, not trying to control the narrative, allowing yourself to go with the flow. I need you to think of life like a wave, and you are on a boogie board. And you're just going with the wave. Sometimes it's taking you back. Sometimes it's taking you over. Sometimes it's going to tumble you under, all those things. But I need you to look at it from that perspective. Okay. And you need to remember to try as hard as you can to keep up with your regularly scheduled schedule, right? So if you get up at 5 o'clock, and that's not me, but if you get up at 5 o'clock and go work out, don't let that change just because something has happened, because you're already, your system, your adrenaline, your fear response is already kicked into high gear. So the last thing that you want to do, I understand it's tough, and this is where I need you to put the guilt aside, because you can't be good for anybody if you're not good, period. And in order to be good, you have to nurture yourself and try to maintain as close as you can, right? Especially if you're in the heart of the disaster, it becomes a little bit harder, but try to make sure that you're eating when you can, drinking when you can, nothing excessive, nothing, just as it was. Because imperatively, your system needs something that's familiar, that is within control. And you, as like I said, unless you're in the heart of the disaster, you have the ability to stick to the routine. Don't feel guilty about it. You've got to be okay. You need to do that for your mental health. Your mental deteriorating because of something that's happening on a natural, like let's say a natural disaster or a global disaster, anything along those lines, that becomes problematic because now you're going to be constantly in that fight and flight. So you have to keep up with a structured schedule. The flip side of that is, this is where your self-care, this is why, and I'm telling you, I preach this, your daily wellness has to be a thing. Do not wait for some big tragedy or your day-to-day anxiety to go into a wellness routine. Wellness is 365 days a year. The happier you are, make sure that you do the wellness. Sadder you are, make sure you do the wellness. Your body has to know that that's here. So when you're dealing on a global level, or you're dealing with something that just seems so big and so unsure and so uncertain, and there's so much fear there, you have to make sure that you're doing your meditations. If you pray, your prayers, your journaling, eating correctly, like I said, sticking to your routine, regardless, as long as you can do that. Not to say it fixes everything, but it allows your body to maintain something where it feels as though it has that level of control. Because when you're talking natural disasters, right? If you're sitting in your house and, I don't know, a tornado came and for whatever reason, nobody knew it was coming. It just popped out of nowhere. So you weren't warned, and everybody's houses were leveled. That's going to literally throw your body in shock. It's going to feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's coming next. All the more reason to maintain your patterns prior to anything negative happening. Most people wait until something bad happens or they have anxiety, and then they go, okay, I'm going to do my breathing exercises. Don't bother now. I mean, sure, it'll help you a little bit, but it's not going to give you the outcome because you're utilizing it out of desperation. You never use your wellness tools out of desperation. Ever, 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 ever. You use your wellness tools to build a foundation of solid wellness. So when your system goes into some stressor mode, you go, oh, my body knows what this is. I'm going to do my meditations again. I'm going to do my breathing because I do this when I'm feeling great. So stop treating your body and the wellness is something that you do only when you're not feeling well. So you have got to make sure that you are dealing with your self-care. This has to become a priority. I mean, seriously, honest priority. Okay. So there's also going to be a lot of emotions that come up, right? And the coping strategies, coping of the unknown, coping of what's going to happen next, coping of when is the other shoe going to drop. So you want to be really careful of maybe going a little excessive on your alcohol or substance use. Be really careful there, right? You got to be careful. Don't just go get wasted because you just can't cope. Because ultimately, remember, hey, I like my wine like the next person. I like my champagne like the next person. I'm here for it. But you don't want to do it as an escape because it's already a depressant. So while it numbs it in the morning, that's good. Not only is you're going to feel bad in general and dehydrated and everything else, but you're now going to feel even more depressed than you were when you started. You also don't want to try to sleep the day away. This is with any kind of anxieties. Don't try to just sleep the day away. And I know, that's a big telltale sign of depression and some levels of anxieties is to just sleep because you just don't have the energy. So this is why a pattern and a structure is needed. Go for a walk, get up, do some stretching, right? It doesn't always have to be something over the top. I'm not asking you to go run a marathon. All right. Obviously, you want to eat, But this doesn't mean go eat 7 pizzas because you're stressed out. I'm a binge eater. So I know that now, luckily, I walk very closely hand in hand with it. I appreciate that binge eating part of me because now I'm able to at least not control it, but maintain it in an aspect where it doesn't flare badly. And if it does flare, it's just not, over the top. So this is important because what will happen is, especially as a binge eater, or if you're an emotional eater, something can be stressful and you go, I can control what I'm putting in my mouth. Right? We've all been there, especially people who have eating disorders. We've all been there and it becomes hard. So you just want to be really careful because and this is across the board, not just for global and natural disasters, but especially when those things hit as well. Now, as best as you can, you want to try not to focus on other areas of stress. So think about in day-to-day life, you wake up 20 minutes late. You're rushing around, you stump your toe on the thing, on the corner of the something, and you're like, oh my God, my toe's broken. It's not, but it's like hurts. Then you went to grab your coffee, you got in the car, you set it down, it spilled on you. Now in your brain, you now will feed that and go, my whole day is going to suck. No, it doesn't have to. Take a deep breath, recenter and refocus your day. The more you breathe life into the negative stressor, the more stress you're going to get. It does not work the other way around. Okay. So as much as you can, when there's things that are out of your control, if it's natural, if it's global, you want to try to minimize other areas of your life that are causing you stress and not allowing this to trigger other areas that are more stressful. Because then not only do you have the bigger stressor, now you have all of these day-to-day stressors that come in. So you're already overwhelmed. That's going to make you even more overwhelmed. Okay. And then, obviously being able to kind of help others is going to be, I guess, probably one of the biggest things possible that you can do. Obviously, especially when you're in another country. So here we are in the States, and I know people are listening in other areas of the world. And, we're not right there. We can't just pop over somewhere and be like, hey, I know what I'll do. I'll bring you some water and some food. And yeah, that's great. But sometimes money is absolutely the most important thing that they need. So you want to make sure, and I will have some resources if you want to donate any financial, or if you're more local, clothes, furniture, I mean, anything. And so I will put that here in the show notes. Ones that I will tell you aren't like scammers. And again, it's a horrible thing to say, but you do always have to keep your head on a swivel. My business, right? Because I have my own practice. And so my business identity has been stolen. Literally, it's almost laughable. It has been stolen that amount of times to where I walk into the bank one day to replace my banking card, walk in the next 3 days later, and they're like, oh, it happened again. Yeah. They're like, oh, you're back again. We'll see you next week. And listen, I have top security on my stuff. Top. But of course, if there's a data leak or it hasn't happened as much now because a lot of the gas pumps aren't doing skimmers anymore. And so there's been a lot of things. I will tell you, if you take Uber and if you take Lyft, that's a big place where people get your numbers. I still take them, by the way. I just know, hey, I'm going to do it on my business card because I know what to expect. And I'm not saying this is for everybody, but anytime you online shop, anytime you do anything, you're always opening yourself up to it. And again, I have top security on my stuff, and yet it still happens. So I don't want you to walk through the world being a paranoid person on a steady basis. I want you to just be aware. So I will put some resources in here in the show notes if you're interested, because here's the thing. And I don't know if you guys have kind of heard it in your countries as well. And I know here in the States, people will say things without thinking. Like, well, what about us? And what about our people? And what about this and that? And I'm like, oh my God. I don't think people really understand unless they were personally affected. And it's an unfortunate thing, but humans in general can become very selfish, right? And they will tell you they're not, because we've all been there. You, me, there's been some level, maybe not on such a big level, but some level where it's been all about you in that moment. You're like, oh man, I have to check myself. And so I say that to you because you can't listen to the chatter. So the biggest part of your coping strategy is be educated on what's going on, but do not doom scroll. When there is a natural disaster, listen, I told you, I was in New York for 9/11. It was to the point where after 12 hours, I couldn't watch it anymore. Number one, I saw the second plane hit one of the towers, and then we watched the towers fall. I didn't need to see it on the news. It was like on replay and for honest reasons, right? Just everybody else wasn't there. But at one point, we didn't have Netflix, but we had like VCRs and stuff. We literally had to put in like a comedy because it was just too much. So I say that to you because you want to stay educated. Don't avoid it, but also be careful of the news sources that you're reading and hearing. Because remember, and again, I don't deal with politics. However, if you lean one way and you tend to just watch that level of the news, consider looking at the other side of the news, especially, I'm not asking you for politics and all that nonsense. I'm saying during a global tragedy. That's probably one of the few times, other than some verbiage, that there may be a level of similarity, but just be careful. Educate yourself and don't just blind faithfully go by what somebody's saying on the news. Do your own research, but don't obsess it. Do not get yourself in a space where you are doom scrolling on a regular basis. Do not do that. Doom scrolling, if you don't know what doom scrolling is, it's on a really low scale. Let's say you go on, I try to avoid Facebook like the plague, but let's say you're on Facebook and I don't know, your local news says, hey, this is what they're doing about blah, blah, blah thing. And for whatever reason, you go deep diving in the comments. And then that you're going to see half people who are going to agree with it, half people who are going to talk mad crap about it. Now you're all up in a tizzy, even if you're not responding. This has now rattled your energy. Why are you doing that to yourself? You don't need to see other people's comments. It's totally irrelevant. You're literally taking other people's opinions, processing them as your own, and trying to understand why somebody thinks the way they do. Stop it. You do not have to understand other people's minds. You do not have to understand other people's thought process because some people are just not going to hear you, even if you tell them, hey, this is Mr. Sunshine. Literally, this is the sun. He's standing beside me and he's telling you he's yellow. And they're like, nope, pink. Like, what in the world? So that's always going to be that. So don't allow yourself, educate, yes. Obsess, no. So get off of the news cycles. Be careful of your social media. I am very strict about my limited time on social media, and make sure that you're only following things that are going to promote positivity. I'm not asking you to be toxically positive, right? But what I am asking you to do is, sure, like I said, be aware of what's going on in the world. Be aware of the things that are going on around you, for sure. However, what I don't want you to do is I don't want you to get so caught up on it that it's a problem. And I see that a lot around election time. People just park in front of the TV. I'm like, you guys have got to stop doing that. You are making yourself miserable, and then you're going to make everybody else around you miserable because they don't even want to talk to you anymore. So it's just not good for your mental space. So when you're asking like what kind of things to do during a global or a natural disaster is, again, try to connect as best as you can locally. What's really needed? Make sure that you do a little research on the company, right? Don't go over the top. Don't just donate money to any old body that texts you and says, hey, I'm part of the Ukraine fund or I'm part of the COVID fund. Don't do that. This has to be validated. But if you choose to do that, good. Make sure that you're giving to reputable sources that you know where it's going. I personally like to donate to animals of any place where there's been trauma. So I'm sure that there's, and I'm going to dig into it, but I think there's a Ukrainian animal fund that I will donate to. That's my choice. I will always donate to animal funds because animals are a huge part of my trauma healing, my recovery of a trauma, being a trauma survivor. And yeah, so my thing is always animals. And I know like my friend Ellen, every year for her birthday, she always donates to St. Jude. That's her charity. She's got 3 or 4 people charities. And it's beautiful because there's enough of us to go around to cover different areas. So I will put an animal charity in the show notes too, if that's your jam. If people, and if you can do both, that's even better. Give some to people, give some in animal areas. Just something to try to build some sense of positivity. Okay? And that's the best thing that you can do. And live your life. You not living your life and you putting your life on hold and feeling guilty does not bring anybody back. It doesn't change the narrative. It doesn't get you any extra points with anything or anybody. So it's just allowing yourself to nurture yourself, care for yourself, love yourself, be kind to people around you. The world that long before this happened and long before COVID happened, people have there's always been a division, right? There's always been a division. And this is just over the last 2 to 3 years, really like 5 years, has gotten even worse. Everyone's on eggshells. Everyone's on like ready to go at each other's throats. And everyone at the same time feels helpless, right? So I just want you guys to understand these same coping strategies are also effective in your day-to-day anxieties, not just on such a big scale. But I did want to do this. Nico, thank you so much for trusting me. Thank you so much for reaching out to me. For anybody who is listening near that area or anywhere in the world, I am here. I don't know what I can do. I don't know if there's something else that you guys need from me. If there is, please personally reach out to me on my Instagram at official Lori Whaler in my DMs. That's going to be the space to really hit me because you can't really connect with me on TikTok unless we are friends. But go on my DMs there. You can always send me an email. You know, my website's also attached in the show notes. If there's something that you guys need, please let me know. And also for anybody listening, this country, other countries, anywhere around the world, if there's something that you feel needs to be addressed that isn't being addressed because it's not newsworthy or it's being pushed under the rug or something, just reach out to me. I can't guarantee I'm going to cover it because I mean, it would have to depend on what it is, but please reach out to me because it's important that people understand that just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. All right. And I'm always going to give you the positive side of it. Like, you know, that's what I saw during 9/11. There wasn't a lot of positivity, but there was positivity. In that token, we were kind of in our little bubble in the New York area, right? Tri-state area, became a little bubble. Everybody was everybody's friend. Everybody was like, nothing mattered at that time except for camaraderie and peace. And it sucks that we have to wait for something so big to be like, oh, let's be kind. Hell no. You be kind 24/7 and never be kind with an expectation. Kindness with an expectation is a business transaction. So guys, be kind to each other. You know, this is tough for all of us. Practice staying in the present space. You only have this time. You don't know what's coming around the corner, but if you focus on that, you're not living now. Take a deep breath. Be grateful. Start your day with gratitude. I know sometimes in this world it's hard to see the gratitude, but I need you to be in a grateful space. Wake up 365 days a year. Set your timer for 10 minutes. Pen to pad. What are you grateful for? Is it just being above ground? I think that's quite a good one. The blue skies, whatever it is, my dog, my cats, whatever. Okay, it's imperative. That's going to help you in your day-to-day life in general. But when we hit these global and natural disasters and all of those things, that's where it's going to become even more imperative to do it. Because sometimes we get so caught up in our lives that it becomes so hard to see that there's things to be grateful for. But I promise you, there is. Okay? So guys, be kind to each other. Be kind, but definitely be kind to yourself. Be kind to each other. Accept things that you cannot change and make a difference where you can.
Check it out.